everybody. Welcome to the Tree Council Grants webinar. I can see that people are entering the session. We'll just give it a little while because we've got lots of participants today, which is wonderful news. Do put your locations in the chat if you'd like to. It's always nice to see where everybody is joining us from. We just give it a minute because it really is a big audience today. There's been a huge amount of interest. So bear with us. We'll just give people time to come in. You can see the little counter is going up rapidly. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for your patience. As I said, we're just waiting for those who are just joining. We're just waiting because there are so many people joining us today. You can see people from Kate from Wiltshire, Natalie from Faversham, Sarah, Ceredigion, Inverclyde, Bruce, lots and lots, Blackpool. I can hardly keep up with it now. That's wonderful news. We'll just give it one more minute for people to come in. You see Bethan from Devon there, Tamsin from Transport for London, Kathy from the Forest of Dean. We really are covering the country. Welcome to those just joining to the Tree Council's Grants webinar. Great to see everybody, to have everybody here. Give it one more minute and then we'll set off. Okay, we'll start. So we're delighted to have everybody with us for this briefing on the launch of a very welcome new £1 million DEFRA fund for trees outside woodlands, as well as a briefing on the other Tree Council grants programmes. My name is Sarah Lom and I'm CEO of the Tree Council, which is a national charity that brings everybody together for the love of trees. Before I introduce the team, please note this session is being recorded and we'll share the link afterwards so that you can go back and listen again. And please also note that we're using Otter AI to transcribe, which will help us capture all the questions and make sure that we can go back to people. There's a lot to take in as we go along, but it's all in the web guidance as well. And we're going to move quite fast as we go through, to mainly so that we allow lots of time for Q&A, because we're sure that there will be a lot of questions at the end. If you do have a question, please put it in the Q&A and not in the chat. It makes us easier for us to focus on the questions at the end. So it's my great pleasure to introduce some of Team Tree Council, some of the people that you may be connecting with over the coming months through the grants process. We have John, our Director of Tree Science and Research, Claire, our Director of Programmes and Comms, Sam, Operations Lead, Adam, Senior Manager Planting Projects, Tess, Project Coordinator, and Geraldine, Grants Officer for Branching Out. So really big welcome, and can we move on to presentation, please?
You can, Sarah. Just give me 30 seconds and I will pull it up. There you go.
Great. So this is all the programme overview of the Tree Council, the different grants programmes. And next slide, the first thing that we really wanted to say was a huge thank you to all our partners who have made these funding programmes possible. DEFRA, Network Rail, National Highways, SP Energy Networks, and of course our own funding partners who fund Branching Out for us. We would not be doing this programme without these wonderful supporting partners. So special thank you to you. So launching straight in, I'm going to hand over to John, who's going to tell you a little bit more about why trees outside woodlands are important.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. So as Sarah said, from the Tree Council's point of view, we have always existed primarily focused around trees outside woodlands. And the grants programme that we're unveiling today has that as its core tenet. We are looking for projects that are involved in trees outside woods. We will explore what that means as we go through the webinar. But basically, it's those trees in parks and gardens and railways and public spaces. And all of the funding that we've got is focused on these sorts of projects. And it's only recently that we've started to truly understand the importance of trees outside woods to the UK's treescape. And recent research that's been done by Forest Research has started to show that as much as 3.2% of the total land area of Britain may be covered by trees outside woods. They are diverse, separate, individuals, like this amazing birch tree that we found up in the Peak District just the other day. Truly stunning trees, some of them. And even other researchers recently started to be able to put further numbers on that. So another bit of work that's been done, and a map that's been produced on England's trees outside woods, which are those single trees, those groups of trees, and those small woodlands, is now showing that they may make up as much as 30% specifically of England's tree cover. So this is where we are focusing our grants and our efforts this year, because this is the sorts of projects that we want to do. And the sorts of projects that we are supporting and funding are many and varied, and these are but a few, as you will see from all the guidance documents. So this is a selection of the sorts of things we would do, but you might have others that you might want to do. There might be trees in parks or in gardens. There might be hedgerows and hedgerow trees that you want to plant. You might want to do something in the space of a community orchard, as in the top right. Agroforestry projects, bottom left. Urban street trees, middle of the bottom row. Or small Miyawaki plantations, where you're trying to establish trees in urban areas. All of these are projects that are suitable for our different grant pots. And across the board, there are some common threads that exist for all of our grants. And you will see in all the documents that will be posted in the chat and in the literature, if you haven't seen them on the website, that are common points of interest across, or common criteria across all of our grants. But basically, we want projects that show clear community benefit. We want projects that show clear biodiversity benefits. We organisationally entirely subscribe to the sort of right tree, right place principle. Obviously, that's locally applicable, and how you determine what the right tree and the right place is part of your application and your bid. But we need to hear that coming from you, why you've selected these trees to be planted in those sorts of sites. We need some sense of what the aftercare is going to look like, and we would hope that you would be willing to share data on monitoring and evaluation. We have a parallel piece of work that we're doing with DEFRA, which is looking at survival rates and establishment rates. And so we're keen that all the projects that we're working on in future start to record how they're looking over time. And the project must be not for profit. That really only matters to businesses. We have but one of our grant pots businesses can apply, but they are projects that must not be a profit-based exercise. So normal sort of woodland creation, not woodland, sorry, trees outside wood creation for a charity, those sorts of things, not a problem, but the project must be not for profit. We will be talking about all of these later, but we wanted you to have a bit of an overview of all of our different grant pots. And Sam will talk in a minute about the details of each one. But broadly speaking, we have 5 different pots of resource that people can look at. We've summarized here the large, the medium, the free trees and the small grants. And so 4 of the pots are financial support for a project. 1 of the pots is free trees, which is the National Highways pot. They differ in their the scale of the projects, from the DEFRA pot, which is larger grants, down to the very small community grants, which is Geraldine's Branching Out pot, which is therefore small community-based projects. They differ also in their location. As you can see, some are Scotland only, some are England only, some are England and Wales, and Branching Out is in all 4 nations. And the type of applicants differ depending upon where the resources have come from, based around those. There are also slightly different conclusion dates that you will see in the paperwork. So each pot has a slightly different deadline for applications. So we will unpack all of these in some detail in a second, but that's essentially the broad overview of the grants that we're doing. Trees Outside Woods, ranging from very small to £40,000 grants, depending upon which pot you apply for. And each one with a Trees Outside Woods and a community benefit, biodiversity benefit. That's the sorts of projects that we'd love to hear from you about. So Sam, I think you're going to take people through the next part, which is the application process.
That's great. Thanks, John. So what I will say is each of the funds do have slightly different timelines. But what I want to quickly do is just give you a rough overview of what the application process looks like, so you can understand kind of the different phases throughout that are pretty much common to all. So first off, there's the application, and this goes through kind of a web portal on our website. And as noted there, for the Trees Outside Woodland Fund, this is actually in a two-stage process. So starting off with an expression of interest with further detail coming later. It's then reviewed by the Team Tree Council here, and we will allocate a point of contact for you to kind of be in touch with throughout the process. Following on from that, and again, it very much depends on if this is appropriate to the fund or not, but there will be a panel decision where we work with our funding partner to come to a decision on whether the application is a success or not. Moving on from that, we will send you a written agreement, so an award letter, and if appropriate, again, if it's free trees, it won't be, but a first payment will be made, so you can kind of get your project started. We then kind of leave you alone to get on with your planting, and then we ask for your final documents. And again, if there is remaining funding to be given, that's when we will send it. Just a key note here is we can't make any payments after the 31st of March 2026. So obviously, any of your final documents will need to be in with us in enough time so we can obviously facilitate those payments. But what's really important to note is throughout the entire process, as you'll see at the bottom, the Team Tree Council will be there to kind of give you support and guidance and be able to answer any questions you've got throughout the process. So moving on, myself and my colleague Adam will kind of talk through each of the available funds in quite high level detail. So just a point to note that all of the information is on the website. We've got some pretty thorough guidance documents that hopefully some of you will already have seen. But we'll just run through some of the key parts of each of the funds. So the Trees Outside Woodland Fund, as John has already mentioned, this is in England with grants ranging between 10 and 40k. Some of the key things to consider here is obviously around the eligibility. So at the moment we are open to local authorities as listed and registered charities with a turnover of 100k. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. There's also obviously a list of project types there. The only caveat being is that we need, as the Tree Council, we need to ensure that there's a fair representation of planting types and the organisations that we support and across different locations as well. So just bear that in mind when you are making applications, that we need to consider the whole range to support within this fund. And what's really key, and probably one of the biggest separators for this fund and the others, is the biosecure procurement requirement. So John, if you could skip on to the perfect, thank you. So all trees purchased through this fund need to either be purchased from a nursery that is as part of the Plant Healthy certification scheme, or that the nursery can provide a ready to plant assessment voucher. Now, if you go on our website, there are links to both of these. So there is a directory, so you can check whether the nursery that you're planning on buying your trees from is Plant Healthy certified or has a ready to plant voucher. And this is really important for this fund, because if the trees you do procure do not meet the criteria, then we will unfortunately have to recover any paid funds and we won't be able to make the final payment at the end. So it's really, really important that you kind of check this. And if you're doing work with other organisations on your behalf, it's obviously your responsibility to ensure that they are following these this criteria as well. Thanks, John. I'm just going to pass over to my colleague Adam, who's going to talk through the Network Rail Community Planting Fund and SP Energy Networks as well.
Okay, thanks, Sam. So the Network Rail Fund is very similar to the SPEN Fund, Scottish Power and Energy Network. So the slides we've got are pretty much identical. Obviously the difference is the SPEN Fund is only applicable in Scotland. Network Rail Fund can also extend into Scotland. An example where you might steer towards that one in Scotland would be, say, if it was a project that was closely associated with Network Rail, such as next to a railway line, etc. I'll try not to read through the slides or go through the guidance online. I'll just have a little talk through some thoughts about if you're applying for them. So we talked about these funds. So private landowners are eligible to apply, but you've got to think about what is the community involvement or social benefit on private land. A good example of one we've done in the past is where it's alongside public rights of way, and planting a hedge, helps for safety and for the enjoyment of people using the path, as well as for the landowner. The sums of money at between £2,500 and £10,000 means it can be quite a nice amount of money if you're planting on multiple sites, or you've got a larger planting scheme on one site. Working on multiple sites, they don't have to be the same landowners, so partnership projects with a few different organisations is great, but the lead partner has to be the eligible criteria. Just thinking about the project types, we do look at the affordability, so what's being delivered for the cost. It's not a hard and fast rule, but if, say, you're planting standards, if you're starting to go for larger standards with lots of protection and lots of watering and on costs, the price per tree can get quite expensive. So you may want to consider putting in standards, putting in lighter trees, light standards, bare roots, and maybe do it as a combined scheme with width planting, such as hedge and shelter belts. I think you'll probably notice that the 20% of the fund of the application can be for the additional costs, so things like contractor costs, or if it's a community planting, some tools, say like a hose pipe to help you water afterwards, but it won't fund aftercare, it won't fund watering for years going forward. There's a little bit of luck, so these are just my thoughts. There's a little bit of luck which you can't do much about if you just happen to put an application in. There's lots of others geographically close to you, so you can't really do an awful lot about that. But you may find that the fund is going to be available for another couple of years, so you may find the project gets funding in future years. We love to see the community involved with the planning and the planting and the aftercare. The social benefit is really who's benefiting from the established the schemes, and then things like nature-based solutions, biodiversity landscape. And then a couple of bits about how you manage your application. I'd really suggest start your application sooner rather than later. You can save it on the system, but don't press submit. Once you press submit, you can't go in and amend it. But better to start early and then tweak it. Wouldn't leave it till the last minute. If you've got questions or you want to have a bit of time and a conversation with me, do so sooner rather than later, because if all of you apply in the last week, I will run out of time before I can get round to you all. And what else is, we want to let people know in advance of the planting season, so we can get on with it, get on with the planting and have the full year to plant. Okay, yeah. So that's the energy network slide, which is the same as the Network Rail one, but that's available in Scotland only. Okay, is it back to you now, Sam?
Yeah, thank you, Adam. So another of our funds available is branching out. So this is for small scale projects on public or leased land for between £250 and £2.5K. And projects can be in England, Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland. So essentially across the UK. As you'll see, the eligibility is a bit wider than for the other funds. And project types can include a combination of hedgerows, orchards and standard trees. So the focus for this is very much for strong community involvement on a much smaller scale. What we do recommend, however, for all the funds is that people do follow kind of biosecure procurement. So although it's not necessarily a criteria for Network Rail, SP Energy networks or branching out, obviously it's really important that the right trees are procured. So whilst it isn't a criteria, we still strongly encourage people to purchase those with the correct certification throughout. Thanks, John. So finally, national highways. So national highways, again, is slightly different, as this is the only one that offers free trees only. All the plants are being grown from British seed in a peat-free environment here in the UK. Now, as you will see, the eligibility is fairly similar than it has been for the others. And again, project types can include, but not limited to, hedgerows, orchards, agroforestry, riparian, and Miyawaki plantings. And the key for this one is just around order numbers. So we can take orders of between 2,500 and 50,000 trees. Now, these can be split into multiple dispatches as required. There will be a species list, so on the tree order sheet that is part of the application, it will be listed on there all of the available species that we do have. All I would say is please note that there are some species that are extremely popular, and because these are being grown from seeds, that we have certain amounts of some species and less of the other, so popular species will run out very quickly. We will do our best to facilitate your request. We may be able to offer some substitutions from species that are on the list. However, what we can't do is procure trees on your behalf from elsewhere for this fund. And that hopefully is a very quick whistle-stop tour through a quick overview of each of the funds. I think there's some questions that we have already received, and I think, John, you're going to answer these in the next couple of slides.
Yes, thank you, Sam. So as we say, we have already started to receive some questions from you in advance of today. We thought we would give you a few of the answers to a few of these things. We thought we'd give you a written answer, but what we're aiming to do is to take all of your questions. We're not going to be able to answer all of them during the course of the next, well, it depends how many you ask, really, I suppose. But we might not be able to ask all of your questions in the next half an hour, so we will look to compile a list of other questions and repeat some written answers for them as we go through. But one, for example, can I apply for more than one fund? Who wants to take that one? Do you want me to talk them through, or does one of you want to do them?
No, I'm very happy to say that yes, you can apply for more than one fund. You can apply to multiple funds, but you will need to complete a separate application form for each of the funds. And an organisation can also apply more than once for the same fund, but you'll need to fill out an application for all the different projects that you have up to the funding range. And I think, as Sam said earlier, we want there to be a balanced number of grants made across geography, across types of planting, and so on and so forth. So we will ensure that all the funding doesn't go to one particular type of planting. So I hope that answers that one. And just to say as well, if you are not eligible for any particular reason, just to reiterate again, partner up with someone. Our motto is working together for the love of trees. Partner up with a local charity, partner up with another higher authority, and get the application in.
Okay, so the next one. Who wants to tackle this one? Sam?
Yeah, sure, I can answer this one. So this is a question we're getting quite a lot at the moment. So my organisation type isn't listed as eligible for the Trees Outside Woodland Fund. So I'm a parish council, or I'm a farmer or individual landowner, community interest company, can I apply? So as has already been mentioned, these organisations are certainly intended to be beneficiaries of this fund. However, just to manage the volume of potential applicants, for example, I think there's 10,000 parish councils in the UK alone. We can't accept applications individually from these organisations. Therefore, the local authority or the charity in the format that was listed in the eligibility will have to submit a coordinated application on behalf, so a bit more of like an umbrella bid, to include individual landowners, parish councils, etc. However, that is just specific for the Trees Outside Woodland Fund. All of those organisations that I've just mentioned, so town and parish councils, individual landowners, community interest companies, housing associations, etc., can apply directly for grants from the other funds. So for Network Rail, National Highways, SP Energy Networks, and branching out.
Okay, thank you. So this one is about what do we need to provide for monitoring evaluation. So as I said earlier, and somebody's asked a question in the chat separately, are we expecting you to monitor these things forever or just through the establishment phase? What we're really interested in is the establishment phase, to get the trees established. And each project is going to be different, because each project might, you might have a project that was from a county council where there were a number of different hedges going in across a county. We might have a project that's on one site. So what we will be doing is working through with each of you what that M&E might look like. We've got some software that will help to do that in a relatively simple stage. And it's all part of research that's going on to try and make sure that we're getting good survival rates across the country. So we will tackle the M&E as we go through with each of you. But what we know so far is that it's not such an onerous task that it's problematic. And we will have those conversations with each and every one of you to make sure it's within the possible when we get to working that through at the other end of the programme. So it is being asked, but we will have a bespoke discussion with each project on what that will look like. Sam, do you want to tackle the one about proximity, because that's come up a number of times recently?
Yeah, sure. So I know it's listed in the criteria, particularly for Network Rail and for National Highways, that there is a proximity to their infrastructure networks. But rest assured, your project does not have to be within the immediate vicinity of road or rail infrastructure. In fact, the majority of the projects that we funded last year were not. However, a project will score higher if it is within a vicinity or has a positive impact on these networks. For example, flood attenuation, riparian, etc., etc., etc. So please still apply to those funds if you're nowhere near kind of the networks of either of those organisations. But please bear in mind that those projects that may score in that part at least a little bit higher than you will. But we still encourage people to apply regardless of their proximity to road and rail networks.
Yeah, and Sam, one for you.
So yeah, just in regards to claiming credits, whether it's carbon or BNG. So if you are planning on claiming any form of credits for your project that is being funded, or you're seeking to fund from any of these grants, you will need to declare it. In some cases, it is accepted that credits can be claimed if it's being used to further community or green benefit. And this is very much kind of fund dependent. However, as the majority of the funds are from public money, they cannot be sold for commercial or private gain. So, for example, to be sold onto a third party in order to meet their net zero targets. And very specifically, they cannot be claimed for the Trees Outside Woodland Fund.
last one, I think, Sam, and then we'll do the
Yeah, no,
question.
of course. So closing dates, and again, as mentioned, each of the funds is slightly different in kind of their makeup. But what you will notice is there is a September decision point for Network Rail, National Highways, and SP Energy Networks. And this is the indication of when the first decision point will be made and therefore communicated to applicants. Now, if after the September date there is still trees and funding available, the application portal will remain open and we'll go through on a rolling basis with the funding partners to make the choice. However, what we can't do is guarantee that all the funding or the trees won't be allocated at that September date. So we do recommend that you do get your application in as early as possible to avoid any potential disappointment.
Okay, I think that's the last one. Oh, sorry. So the last one, obviously, is if you have any questions relating to the project, that's what we're here for, to talk it through. We're happy to help. Start by sending us an email, and then you'll be allocated one of the team who will talk to you about your projects. That's the email for the team. So send us your queries as you go through the process, and one of the team will come back to you. And now we're going to take questions that are coming in live. So we've got lots and lots, and we will do our very best to cover as many of them as we can as we go through. So I'm going to start with some. Some sort of generic ones. So Nicola's asked, can we apply for projects to cover multiple sites? We manage many sites and would like to plant a number of them to enhance biodiversity and the enjoyment of the public who use them. Who wants to take that one, Sam?
Yeah, so hopefully this has been answered as part of kind of one of the questions on the slides. But yes, more than welcome to apply for multiple sites, whether that's within the same fund. So one fund, multiple sites. So for example, you could apply for 2,500 trees for 10 sites, 25,000 trees from National Highways, or for Network Rail, the up to 10k could cover multiple sites within that. And as mentioned, you are more than welcome to apply for more than one fund. However, we just need to ensure that you do a separate application for each fund. And just as mentioned, we need to ensure that there is a fair and even spread of types of projects, organisations, and locations. So obviously, if you're putting in lots and lots of applications, we cannot guarantee that we will be able to support all of those. So hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, thank you. And if people have got follow-ups, do come back and we'll try and take them as we go through. Matched funds, Francesca said about matched funding. Can we use smaller grants to part-fund projects? It's an interesting one. Sarah, do you want to take that?
I see. I think it's obviously an advantage and a benefit if you can supply some match funding. So we would consider the funding that you are already bringing to be match funding. If you apply to us for a grant, put in your application form that you have already secured a certain amount. So I see no reason why, so long as the match that you're asking for is for trees and not for simply aids or other things. There has to be a tree element.
Okay. Thank you. Mary Jane has asked a question about community tree nurseries, where they're gathering seed from local woodlands. While we follow biosecure measures closely, we don't have the certificate or voucher. Which funds are we eligible to pay for our community tree planting elements? Now, Mary Jane, we've had a lot of conversation about that with DEFRA over the last few months, particularly in regard to the funding that they've got, because they wanted it to be from a biosecure procedure. and we had to be able to validate that. As Sam said, one of the advantages we have with some of the other funds is that they're not quite needing such verifiable data, but we will still want to see that you are doing those biosecurity measures closely. So it's certainly a question that's topical, it's interesting, it's one that we're exploring, and it will be one that we give you some sort of answer afterwards in writing, because we will need to just check with the others how they feel about that. But we understand the need for community tree nurseries to apply. We've been working in the community tree nursery space for the last few years, so we absolutely want it to be part of the model going forward. We are just finessing exactly how that will look over the next year or so. Anybody want to add to anything to that? Or have I covered it? No, I covered it. Okay. Mary Claire's asked a question. With the Network Rail Fund, would it be possible to plant on land owned by Network Rail, i.e. trees outside of the Catford Bridge station, for Mary Claire said specifically. Sam, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, of course. So absolutely, but as noted, you need to ensure that you've obviously got permission from the landowner, and this is true to all funds and all projects, that you've got permission from the landowner to actually undertake the planting. I know you've asked around kind of potentially linking up with Network Rail. All I will say is we need to ensure that we are impartial throughout the process. For us, it's really important that we have a fair and transparent application process, that we are in a position to provide support and guidance to both the applicant and our funding partner in making the decision. But we need to ensure that obviously we are not creating bias in the process, and therefore I would probably say in that situation is that we would strongly encourage you to make sure that your project is feasible before you put the application in. So that would probably be speaking to whoever it is on that site, probably starting with the station manager, to make sure that you have permission before you put your application in.
Okay, thank you. Jeremy's asked a project. If the project is on private land with no public access and none of these funds are a viable option, what if it's planted by volunteers? So Jeremy, most of the funds that we've got have asked for at least public visibility. So that's not quite the same as public access. In other words, it has to be visible from, so a hedgerow that's planted the other side of a field from a footpath. I think 4 of the funds we could do those sorts of things. If they're being planted by volunteers, they are obviously it's delivering community benefit. So we would definitely look at each one on a bespoke basis. And what we're trying to do this year is to give a bit more bespoke support to those sorts of projects. So if you have a particular one that fits at least visibility visibility or where volunteers are involved, please do get in touch. But as
Adam's got his hand up as well, John.
Yeah, I've had a few chats with people, similar position. A couple of other things is where Sarah mentioned partner up. So think about landowner charities, umbrella organisations that might be looking at planting schemes. Then your land might be a beneficiary of it. And also if there's things like local sort of social impact community groups, it's a nice opportunity for sort of skills for life training for people to come and have an opportunity to come and learn how to plant and develop those skills. So there's, you can make some social impact and benefits in those ways.
Or there may be a specific species that would benefit in a particular way from what you're doing.
Yeah. Okay. One for Sam. Sonia said, are the national highway trees bare root whips or cell grown?
Very much dependent. So again, it will be indicated on the tree order sheet. So some are cell grown and some are bare roots. It's just dependent on species.
And Sophie's also asked, do gains and cards, I was about to say, do guards and canes come with the free trees?
Unfortunately, not. It is just the provision of free trees.
Okay. Mary Claire says, and somebody else has asked, do we know if this if the funds will be rolled out again this time next year, and or is this a one-time fund or will it run again in 26, 27? So that depends on
I'll
the
answer
fund.
that one. Yeah, I'll go for that one. So yeah, we're delighted to have the new interim fund, which is in partnership with DEFRA, and there is no guarantee that there will be funding next year. We will continue to press that there should be continuation, because it's so important, we know, for all sorts of different groups. Some of the other programs we know already will continue. So Network Rail and SPEN will and National Highways should be continuing next year, and branching out, Geraldine, I think, has been continuing for more than a decade now. So so the answer is yes, but not necessarily with the Trees Outside Woodland Fund.
Thank you, Sarah. Andy and Richard have both raised questions about watering and establishment. One of the problems of not knowing what was going to be happening with the fund, particularly the DEFRA fund next year, was that we couldn't offer longer term watering in that, because this is a 1 year pot. Therefore, we couldn't guarantee that longer term. But Andy has asked whether maintenance can be built into the cost in the 20%. And yes, Andy, that's part of the project. Will be assessed on the value for money. So if watering is essential, which they often are for street trees, then it will be looked at in that light. So we do completely understand that watering is, particularly for street trees, is essentially part of it. But certainly from the DEFRA funds, we couldn't guarantee fundings for more than the 1 year. So yes, build that cost in as part of that upfront. And I think it says that in the paperwork, to ensure that people built all of those establishment costs in at the beginning, so that we can look at that. Right, who's next? Where's next? There's a question, sorry, there's so many questions. Would it be okay to provide locations at the end of the project rather than when we submit the application to you? So this is, of course, for those that might be thinking about doing bids where they might not know every location that they're going to be planting in. So again, say a county council wants to do a project where they're giving away trees in hedges or something of that ilk. And yes, it would be possible for us to submit, for you to submit the details at the end, but we will need to caveat that we must have those locations before the year end, because we have to report against where all the trees have gone. But we don't expect you necessarily on those sort of multiple bids to be able to provide everything up front. Sam, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you've pretty much covered it, John. The only thing I would say is just the requirement that we have all of the planting locations prior to the release of kind of final funds. And obviously we need to know where those locations are in enough time before the end of the year, so we can actually make that final 30% payment as an example. But it is vital that as soon as the locations are known, that we do get that information.
And we do have to have a general idea of locations in an application. Yeah.
And then, sorry to interrupt, with branching out, obviously, project location, the community has already identified the location, so that's not an issue there at all. But yeah, we do need to know exactly where at the start of the procedure.
And Geraldine, somebody's asked a question about involving children in the branching out grants. Do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, ideally, all community projects should involve as many cross sections of your local community as possible, but we do particularly welcome involvement from children and young people, not just at the planting stage, but in the aftercare and continuing engagement with the whole project.
Thank you. We have a question from Anonymous. Anonymous. If they're successful for the DEFRA fund and invited to submit a stage 2 bid, is there a window in which we have to submit the bid, e.g. say 4 weeks? They're just trying to establish their own timelines. So what we're saying to everybody that's applying, and Sam might come in on this in a second, what we're saying to everybody is that there is we will give you a response to whether you go to stage 2 in 3 weeks, and then it is up to you the speed at which you do your application, because we will be having a rolling process during the course of the summer where we will be taking the grants that have come through to the panel that will be looking at whether or not they get funded. The issue of leaving it later is that we might end up having allocated all the money by sort of November, for example, but so we can't give you a specific deadline on when you should get them done, but broadly speaking, the earlier that you can get them in, the greater the chance that there might be some funding. We've decided to do that on a rolling basis this year, as we have only a relatively short time frame, and we thought it was fair on those of you that could get your projects in early to give you the chance to get started in planning with an early decision. But Sam, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. I think it's probably just to be really clear that if you are invited to conduct the stage 2 part of the application, that is not us saying that your application has been approved. That's merely us saying that you've kind of gone through the first stage. We are happy with the eligibility of your project, but actually we're after the details ready for the decision with the panel off the back of the stage 2. So just to be really clear, stage 2 doesn't mean that we have kind of approved your project at that stage.
Okay.
John, there's a question in the webinar chat that you might not have seen, which is from Judy. Do funds cover revenue elements such as public consultation, pulling the project together, project management, or just the trees? And the answer to that is there is not revenue. It is capital.
Okay. So where else have we got? Somebody said, can we provide some examples of community benefits, please? Because obviously we've asked that community benefit be part of the output of these projects. So community benefit might be that we've involved the community in the planting of it. It might be that we've consulted some of the community about what they want and where they want it. It might be that it is for the benefit of the community. A community orchard, for example, is being delivered, so it's to the benefit of the community. So we will take a holistic look at those community. We're not expecting you to have worked out sort of specific. Well, I don't know. I mean, some of you might have the ability to be scoring your own internal processes and your own internal ways of engaging communities, but that will be part of your application, and we will look at that as we go through. Anybody want to add?
And it may be Geraldine, I'll just say quickly, it could be how your project is going to be used after it's completed. So Geraldine, this is really what very much what you focus on. You go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I was just going to read out, there's a lovely response in the chat from Tysol Youth. Our youth carried out an orchard and edible hedgerow project through the Branching Out project. And the young people have been fully involved in the maintenance of the trees, etc. And we're hopefully cropping our first fruits this year. So very exciting and satisfying. I think that's a really perfect example of great ongoing community involvement. And, community orchards are probably the best type of project in terms of being able to continue engagement with your local community. And also hedgerow projects as well, because you can be involved in hedge maintenance and hedge assessment and, checking biodiversity, all sorts of ways you can engage your local community. And I must say that's one of the key points when we're assessing the Branching Out grants is it's not just like, oh, we're going to get some people to help us stick in the plants. It's more about what happens after that. So, yeah.
Adam?
Yeah, just a few other quick community benefits mentioned orchards. So things like play in play areas. Sometimes you can have like willow structures and willow circles. Shade in parks without trees, you can sit underneath them with the shade. Forest schools are very good, obviously, with the wildlife and interaction. Screening and landscaping. So screening eyesores, which can also be security for boundaries. A personal challenge I'm setting myself is to see more hazel planted in allotments so that we can start coppicing them for pea sticks and bean poles and reduce the amount of bamboo being imported. But that's like a personal little quirk of mine.
And great community benefits for schools that want to use, you know, the like shading. It's even a simple thing like Adam mentioned there. Schools that are in the full glare of the sun or by a busy road, etc. There's massive community benefit from a pollution busting hedgerow, for example.
So there's a question about how does the funding work and the amount of the funding work? Is it a fixed amount per tree, or do we just provide the total project cost? So what we've done is that we've avoided giving everybody a fixed price per tree, because we know that there are great variations that go on around the country. We know that there are different sorts of projects where you might want to be bidding for street trees, or you might want to be bidding for whips to plant a hedgerow, and therefore we thought we wouldn't give everybody a fixed rate per tree. So therefore it is about the total project cost, and what we'll be looking at is trying to get good value for money from the project. But as we've heard, some of you might need to do some watering, some of you might need to do other things. So those things will be built into your total project cost, and we will be looking then at the value of your grant relative to the trees that get planted, trying to find the balance across the projects. So please give us your total project costs and your estimated number of trees, and that will be the way that we will be able to look at subsequent conversations with you about what you're trying to achieve. But we won't be, you know, just because a project is scoring street trees, it won't be compared with a project that is planting a hedge, because they're patently not comparable in terms of the projects. They're going to be delivering different things for different people in different places. So each one will be assessed differently. Anybody want to add to that? Sarah, do you want to add to that?
No, I think that's covered.
Okay. One of the questions we've had from Kathy is an interesting one. I don't know that I know the answer to this one off the top of her head. She says, as a local authority, could we apply for trees for our residents to plant 1, 2 or 3 trees in their gardens? I don't know that we've actually thought through a garden-based scheme and what that might look like, but it would certainly be something that the team would be happy to talk through, Kathy, if that's something you wanted to do. So please do contact us using the email as we suggested, and we will follow up with that. And then there is a whole bunch of questions which are VAT questions, and the moment I say VAT questions, I do get very squirrely about giving any sort of definitive answer. But one question, and we might have to come back to you because VAT scares me. As local authorities can claim back VAT, do we claim for £8,000, for example, for a Network Rail one, or can we claim for the full amount? Who wants to?
Well, I'll kind of just kick off, but it won't be a complete answer. We won't pay VAT where you can offset or retrieve VAT. So if you cannot recover your VAT, then we will pay VAT. However, you could still only apply up to the £40,000. But if people have more questions on that, send them individually, because it is complicated with which trees are and aren't vatable, etc., etc. Adam's hand's gone up.
Yeah, really quirky little detail is my understanding is you don't pay VAT on trees that bear edible fruit.
Correct.
So if you're planning your scheme, you put an orchard in, there's no VAT to be paid on it. I believe I've had some applications that have come through, and the cob nuts provide nuts, so you don't pay VAT on them, and the nursery wasn't charging VAT on hazel in a hedge, but was charging VAT on the others. The message is it's really good to get a quote from the nursery of what exactly you want to buy, and that means that you know what VAT you're being charged. But to try and understand the VAT when you look at the sums at the bottom and you've got a mixture of fruit trees and nut trees in it takes hours, as I can testify personally.
And as Geraldine has worked on for many, many years, there's also, because many schools can recover their VAT, some can and some can't. So it is, there's no one all answer, except that the maximum grant is for trees outside woodland or the others is what is stated. So you will be asked whether or not you can offset or recover VAT as part of the application process.
Okay, James has said, if trees outside woods is solely capital, can we use our matched funding for the revenue element, such as a part-time project officer or distribution costs or similar? And the answer to that, James, would be yes, of course. If the authority has the capacity of some matched fundings to bring in, which would help with those revenue costs, then yes, of course. We can pay for the capital items, particularly with the DEFRA funded work, but as you've identified, that does create a problem for the revenue elements. But again, those sorts of conversations will, if we need to explore that further, we can do, and we might get back to people in writing afterwards.
So I think we've probably, John, got time for one more question before we move and say goodbye.
I had got to the same point, Sarah, but I haven't decided which of the
many questions which we've received. Just to reiterate that thanks to Otter, who will be helping us compile all the questions afterwards, we will come back to people. You can look at the recording as well, and there is lots of guidance to go at. So if you have got a question, and if for any reason you don't hear your question and get it answered, get in touch.
I think that's probably the best place to wrap it up. So,
yeah. So just to say again, a huge thank you to our funding partners. It is wonderful that we do have this range this year, particularly in a year where we know there is a big demand. Thank you to all of them. Thank you to everybody who's on this webinar for your interest, for your enthusiasm. Thank you for wanting to plant trees, to care for trees, to establish trees. And we look forward to receiving your applications. Get them in early. Some of them are first come, first served. So if you leave it to the end, you're lessening your chances. Good luck, everybody. And thanks, team.